Today on an all-new Dr. Phil.
It's been dubbed the Catch Me If You Can story.
You won't believe.
Were you an imposter?
Absolutely.
What he pulled off.
You presented yourself as a physician's assistant.
Well, it looked that way.
You performed CPR on a patient who had OD'd?
Is this the world's greatest teen con artist?
I was charged with impersonating a police officer.
The exclusive interview.
To go to the ER, I had to lie.
Well, you didn't have to lie. You need to own this. Let's do it.
Have a good show, everybody. Here we go.
This is a safe place to talk about hard things.
Stand by, Dr. Phil.
I'll try to be an emotional compass and point you in the right direction.
5, 4.
I am not giving up on you.
Go, Dr. Phil.
I want you to imagine that a loved one checks into the ER with a life-threatening trauma. You want to believe that they are in the hands of the best and brightest doctors, nurses, and staff, right? Well, now imagine finding out that one of the people treating your loved one wasn't a doctor, wasn't a nurse, wasn't a medical professional, wasn't even a medical intern. Instead, he's just some teenager straight off the street. Sound crazy? Well, you're going to meet someone. His name is Matthew, and he did just that. Take a look.
How did a teenage boy deceive an entire hospital and treat patients as a physician's assistant for more than a week?
17-year-old Matthew Scheit walked out of a Lake County Sheriff's substation without saying a word. It was like a scene from the movie Catch Me If You Can. Scheit started working as a medical biller, but immediately he began bragging on his Facebook page about what police say he was really doing at the hospital. He wore scrubs, saying he was, quote, working with a surgeon full-time. Police say the 17-year-old had contact with patients and even helped out with a cardiac arrest patient. Surgical management should have forced Scheit to provide his driver's license, but instead they accepted his social security card, so he never had to show proof of his age.
Tears streamed down 18-year-old Matthew Scheit's face. Now the jury will decide whether the frightened teenager or the stoic defendant will go to prison for 40 years.
You will be sentenced to 1 year in the Osceola County Jail.
It could have been 20 years for Matthew Scheit, but instead he got just 1 year behind bars, with most of that time already served.
There's no indication at all that you intended or wanted to hurt anybody, so that clearly could have resulted from your acts.
The judge did say that he was afraid Scheit would do it again, so he gave the boy a year of house arrest and 8 years of probation.
Well, Matthew Scheit is speaking in an exclusive interview for the first time today. How on earth did he think he could get away with this, and why did he do it? Well, take a look.
I never presented myself to anybody as a physician's assistant. It was a lie that spiraled out of control. One of my good friends got me a job as a clerical worker at her father's surgical management practice. One day, her father, Dr. Estrada, was doing rounds at the hospital and invited me to go get the atmosphere and the feel for inside of the hospital and his patient interaction. The amount of exposure really made me kind of fall in love with the medical field. It was exciting. It was very cool. So I went down to the HR department and asked the lady that was up at the front desk to be issued an ID. Not even thinking about it, I lied and told her that I was a physician's assistant student, but she ended up printing an ID that said physician's assistant. As I'm walking out the doors of the hospital having this PA ID, I'm thinking to myself, you know, what the hell did I just do? About a week and a half into this, a patient ended up coding. They were going to call her time of death, and the physician told me to take over CPR. So I did. I did CPR for about 10 to 15 minutes. While I was doing CPR, her heart ended up actually starting back up. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was me, but her heart ended up actually restarting. While I was there with the hospital, there was multiple times where, you know, there was a lot of interaction between me and the patient. I would listen to breath sounds, you know, with the stethoscope. I reviewed patients' charts, held down a, you know, mentally combative patient. There was also times where if patients needed sutures, I would pass them the instruments. As I look back now, I know I overstepped my boundaries, but at that time, I didn't know that what I was doing was really wrong.
Okay, Matthew, so how did this all happen? Because you say, I didn't really know I was doing anything wrong, but the police sure saw it differently.
Right. I mean, at that time, was just going there just to shadow and just to learn as much as I possibly could. Growing up, that's, the only thing that I really wanted to do was just go into the medical field.
You say you got a wrong ID badge.
Right.
You went to HR and you were there to pick up a student badge for shadowing, which means you just get to watch what's going on. You get to be in the room. You're allowed to go back through the doors, right?
Well, actually, at that time, I was actually working for surgical management, which is the doctor's office. Once the doctor's office got bought over by HCA, which is the hospital that I was shadowing at, I had to go back and get another ID. Now, during that time as well, I was wanting to shadow in the emergency department. I went back to the HR department because I knew I needed a new ID anyway, and ended up actually telling her that I was a physician's assistant student, and that's when she issued me a physician's assistant ID.
Okay, so you went back and lied about being a student. That was a lie because you weren't a student.
Right.
And you wanted a physician assistant student ID.
Right.
But she just gave you a physician's assistant ID.
Correct. Yes, sir.
So you just put it on and went and presented yourself as a physician's assistant.
Well, I was, I guess in that way, having the ID, it looked that way. But going in, when I was interacting with the physicians and with the other PAs that I was shadowing, they all knew that I was a physician's assistant student. Or I had told them I was just a student, that I was not just a PA.
Okay. But I'm just trying to understand how you see this. It's okay. So they give you a physician assistant badge, and you look at it and go, wrong badge, right? Because here we have, this is it, PA, physician's assistant. Right. So you put that on and walked into the ER.
Right. Yes, sir. And that's when I went up, I went over to the ER director and was, that's how I ended up getting the approval, because by having that ID, I could follow through as far as saying that I was a student, as a physician's assistant student, was allowed to shadow. Because for the hospital, you cannot shadow unless you are.
But that doesn't say student, that says PA.
Right.
And they have some that say student. That's what you went and asked for, right?
Correct.
And you went and put it on, so you presented yourself as a PA. You say, no, I didn't tell anybody I was a PA. I just put the badge on that said I was, and walked in where they work and started doing what they do. This just kind of, to use your words, spiraled out of control.
It didn't. From the one lie when I first said I was a physician's assistant student, and the HR department, them giving me that ID, that's where it all kind of started. Even though at the end of the day, the only thing that I wanted to do was go to the ER and just shadow, I had to lie and go down there and tell them that, I was a student and I wasn't. Well, in order for me to shadow.
Yeah, in order to do what you wanted to do, which you weren't qualified to do because you weren't a student, which is a requirement, you lied about that so you could get the badge. Then they gave you the wrong badge on top of the lie you'd already told, so now you've told one lie to get in the game at all, then they give you the wrong badge, and so you wear it and go down there and present yourself as a PA.
One of the nurses ended up running out and had said that the patient was coding, and the doctor told me to go ahead and start CPR.
And later,
they, searched my vehicle and found a gun under the passenger seat. The officer immediately pulls me out of the vehicle, puts me in handcuffs, and tells me that I'm under arrest.
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil.
This man has been torturing me for over a year.
You are out of your mind. They're back. Still married.
Did you throw a 10-inch rock at him?
I might have.
But separated.
How am I stalking you, sir?
Looking in the windows qualifies, right?
The battle continues.
I didn't assault anybody because they danced around.
So they were ducking and weaving?
Yeah.
Well, people do that when you're attacking them.
That's tomorrow.
It's been dubbed the Catch Me If You Can story because much like the movie, the teenager in court today is accused of being an imposter. He was arrested for posing as a physician's assistant.
Just to set the record straight, I was not living in a fantasy world whatsoever. I was doing something that I just love doing. I love the medical field and had a very, very strong passion for it. I went about it the wrong way. It was something that was presented to me, and I just went along with it.
You performed CPR on a patient who had OD'd?
Correct. While I was in there, one of the nurses ended up running out while I was at the front desk with the PA I was shadowing. Nurse ran out and had said that the patient was coding. We all kind of ran in there together. At first, I was, in the very back and just kind of watching everything that was going on. They ended up calling the code on her and pulling everybody out of the room and stopping the medications and everything. And I was still in there with the doctor, and her heart started contracting again. And then that's at which time he told me to go ahead and start CPR. Now, that was not the doctor that I was not shadowing, and he did not know my position or why I was really there, unless somebody else had told him, but I never actually had any interaction prior to that.
What were you, how were you dressed during this? You had on scrubs?
Correct. Yeah, there was scrubs.
And a white coat?
During some, most of the time that I was there, I had like a little short lab coat on.
Yeah. And you had a stethoscope?
There was a stethoscope, yep.
And you'd go listen to people's hearts? And
only under their supervision. I was never released by myself. I was always either with somebody. But as far as, if one of the PAs ended up telling me to have a listen, that was on occasion that I would listen to the breath sounds.
Yeah, and you made a point that the white coat was a little shorter because the doctor's coats were a little longer?
Right.
And so your point is, well, mine was a little shorter, so I wasn't pretending to be a doctor. I had on a shorter white coat. I had on like a badge and a white coat and a stethoscope in the ER, but it was shorter than the other coats, so therefore, come on, guys, it was shorter.
Well, that's usually what the students end up wearing. Right. I know either way, there's no justification to it whatsoever.
But apparently there is. And that's what I'm trying to figure out is what you think about this.
Right.
Because having worked in the healthcare delivery system for most of my life, I see this situation that you got caught up in that just spiraled out of control is outrageously dangerous. It's just outrageously dangerous. It's all fine as long as everything's going okay, but if you get into a critical situation where a critical decision has to be made and a critical action be taken in a short period of time, and there's somebody that you assume has the training to play their part, and in fact they don't, it can break down really bad really quick. Yes, and so I'm just wondering if you see it that way.
Absolutely. I mean, now I do.
Because you're kind of saying, like, it wasn't a big deal. It was just, it's kind of,
Yeah, I mean, now as I look back, I mean, of course, it was, of course, the worst decision that I've, ever made. It's going to affect me for the rest of my life. But being 16 in the hospital and my mind was not developed as it is now. So going back, of course, I wouldn't think that, if somebody did ask me to do something and I felt pressured, of course, I would,
Yeah. And you said you tried resuscitation on a patient. You did. I mean, you got in there and got busy.
Yes.
Okay.
One of the doctors ended up, telling me, like I said.
Yeah. All right, we got to take a break. Next, you won't believe it, Matthew was put on probation. But that didn't really slow him down. Find out how he landed behind bars for a second time when we come back.
The officer immediately pulls me out of the vehicle, puts me in handcuffs, and tells me that I'm under arrest.
You don't want to show your face?
And later, you're saying, I never said I was a physician's assistant. I put on the coat, I put on the badge that says I was, I put a stethoscope around my neck, and I walked into the ER wearing all of that stuff, but I never said, hi, I'm a physician's assistant.
This November.
A former UFC fighter arrested for allegedly beating his wife.
He would have killed her that night if she hadn't left.
Shut up. You're so annoying.
This is the mother that's raising your children.
Yeah, great for her. She's the one that took them from me.
Is she beating the odds?
I have 12 titles in weightlifting, and I have cancer.
Or making stuff up?
My mom never had cancer.
You said that you lost 100 pounds in 6 days. You can't lose 100 pounds in 6 days unless they're cutting off body parts.
Did their son's girlfriend kill him?
You believe she knew he had overdosed and didn't tell you.
Yes. Did you wait 45 minutes to get us to make sure that he was dead?
No.
You are lying. Tell the truth.
You're psychotic. You need to be in a ward. My mom, she's an evil person.
They say they are not allowed to visit their dying father.
That is not true. If he wanted to see you, he'd call you.
You are so hostile.
Is Mom keeping them from their dying dad?
Do you want a relationship with your children?
Of course. Are you okay with me calling them?
Stop asking for permission to talk to them.
This November on Dr. Phil.
Well, Matthew Scheit made headlines when he was caught impersonating a physician's assistant. He says, I didn't really impersonate a physician's assistant, even though I was wearing a physician's assistant badge. I had on a white coat, I wore a stethoscope, and I was in the ER. So I never really told anybody I was a physician's assistant, even though the police report says he did. He said that got cleared up in court. It was all just kind of inferred. Well, after being hauled away in handcuffs, you would think, man, learned his lessons. You don't pretend to be somebody you're not. But not Matthew. Because while on probation for all of that, he was arrested again. Take a look.
A teenager accused of dressing up as a physician's assistant and now a cop tries to hide his identity as he walks out of a Miami-Dade jail.
But you don't want to show your face?
Miami police say Matthew Scheit was driving a Ford Crown Victoria with takedown lights and a mounted laptop.
Marked patrol vehicle gets by me and pulls me over. They, searched my vehicle and found a gun under the passenger seat. It wasn't my car, it wasn't my gun. There was a sheriff's badge from when I was younger. And there was also a taser. I was planning on getting certified through the taser course. The officer immediately pulls me out of the vehicle, puts me in handcuffs, and tells me that I'm under arrest. I was charged with impersonating a police officer and 2 counts of carrying a concealed weapon.
Good grief. So, was that all a misunderstanding?
There was some facts, of course, that, as far as the laptop mount, but.
Because they said the laptop was mounted in the car like it is in a police car.
There was no mount or anything like that.
Where was the laptop?
In the trunk of the vehicle.
But this wasn't your car?
No, that was not.
And were you impersonating a police officer?
I had on normal, a button-up dress shirt. I had tan khakis on and Van shoes. My windows were rolled down. I had music playing.
Whose car was this?
One of my friends. Yep.
Did you have a driver's license?
Yes.
Okay, so you could be driving.
Right.
You were pulled over by an unmarked car, right?
I was pulled over by a patrol vehicle after, but like a marked vehicle. But the gentleman that I was speaking to was an undercover detective that was 2 lanes down in traffic.
And did you know that?
At that time, I did not. He pulled up next, like I said, next at the stoplight and said that.
What was this about you asking him why he wasn't wearing a seatbelt?
Yeah, that's. He pulled up next to me in the lane and asked me, or he had said that 2 guys back there tried to sell him drugs, and I said, man, you're trying to tell somebody else you don't have your own seatbelt on. And then from there, I drove off, and then that's when I was stopped by a patrol marked unit.
Why did they stop you?
When the lady first pulled me out, she didn't say anything to me. They immediately started searching my car. And then they had come over, and after finding the bag that was in the trunk, they told me that I was under arrest for impersonating a law enforcement officer.
Well, did you tell the officer that you were Miami Beach Police?
No.
Because they said you did, right?
He said that I told him to put his seatbelt on. And then he had asked me, according to the police report, he had asked me if I was a law enforcement officer, and he said I responded yes.
Well, I just asked you, you said you were a cop, and you said no. But now you said yes.
In the police report, that's what was said, but that's not what I had said.
So you didn't say yes. When he said, are you a police officer, you said?
That conversation never even happened between us. The only conversation that we had is when he pulled up next to me and asked, that told me that 2 guys back there tried to sell him drugs. And then,
but in the police report, he said that you told him you were a police officer for Miami Beach. Then they searched your car. And what they found in Matthew's car during his Miami arrest was interesting. I made a list of it, actually. They found a semi-automatic .380 Ruger pistol, 7 rounds of .380 ammunition, a shoulder mic, laptop, black folding knife, baton, taser, radio, handcuffs, earpiece, a sheriff's officer badge, black bag containing deputy sheriff's shirts. That was the list in evidence of what they found in the car. Was that all in the car?
Yes, sir.
And that was your stuff?
The firearm was not. The gun that was under the passenger seat. Like I said, the vehicle that I was driving was my friend's. The gun was also registered in his name and everything. The bag that was actually in the back from when I was an explorer at the sheriff's office had the contents that I had while I was an explorer there in Osceola County. And the radio, the handcuffs, the earpiece, that was mine. The sheriff's office ID that I had that was issued to me was in that bag as well. Our original plan to even go down to Miami was not only just kind of escape from everything that happened in Osceola and just kind of get away and hopefully just relax a little bit, was to also, get certification in a security course. So.
Yeah. So why do you have all that stuff in your car? Well, you even got in trouble when you were in the Explorer program. You were wearing a sheriff's jacket, a sheriff's deputy badge, and you were carrying mace. So why do you have all that stuff in your car?
Because I was going down there to...
Like the microphone and the earpiece and all of that?
Well, that stuff was issued by the sheriff's office whenever I was an explorer.
The Explorer program?
Correct. Whenever I first got arrested in Osceola County from the physician's assistant case, I was immediately terminated, and that stuff was not turned in.
Well, you even got in trouble when you were in the Explorer program. Is like junior G-man cop type thing. It's where they give you some training and orientation and stuff that maybe leads to young people wanting to join law enforcement, right?
Yes, sir.
And so you were in that program. Mm-hmm. And you had problems in that program, didn't you?
No, I only was written up once, is whenever I was going in to get my dry cleaning and I had a vest that was underneath.
Well, you were wearing a sheriff's jacket with a patch. You were carrying a sheriff's deputy badge. And they said you were not wearing your uniform properly in public, and you were carrying mace. There were a whole lot of infractions there, because I have the report.
Right.
I'm bringing it out, and we can read it.
Yeah, the jacket I did forget, but it wasn't really a write-up. I mean, that was the only instance where I was actually written up. But yes, I mean, those are correct. That is correct.
Well, criminal offense attorney for Matthew is here. His name is Mark Eiglarsh, and he's been on the show before. He helped us with the Trayvon Martin story from Florida as well. He's been representing Matthew after he was accused of impersonating a police officer in Miami. So, Mark, good to see you in person.
Good to see you, too.
You were on satellite last time.
That's right.
We talked. Thanks for being here again. So you represent Matthew.
Yeah, and I consider it a privilege.
Yeah. And at this point, how's he doing?
Let me just say this. I will not defend his actions. He made some seriously poor choices. As he said, as his brain was developing, the portion governing reason and judgment wasn't clearly fully formed. And he made some choices that made him a multiple convicted felon before he could legally drink a beer. What I will tell you, though, is at the heart of it, this kid is pure love. That in the hospital, everything he did was designed to help people. He held a woman's hand as she was being sutured. Everything he did to help people. And with the law enforcement thing, he wanted the guy to wear a seatbelt. Turned out, unfortunately, it was an undercover cop. And that didn't rub him the right way. And for that, he spent a year in solitary confinement by himself. He had no one to talk to, and he analyzed his life. He's been going to therapy, and he's made a dramatic improvement.
Mm-hmm. And you had a hard time them even letting him out of the state, right?
That's correct. That was a monumental battle.
Do you think he's being completely candid with me?
I do. I've spent quite some time talking with Matthew daily, getting to know him, serving almost as a mentor to him. And I also looked through the facts, and I don't think that everything written was accurate. Yeah, I believe that Matthew is telling you what he did, and he's being honest and open with you when he says that he made some seriously poor choices. But he loves law enforcement, he loves the hospital, and he had an opportunity to play the role of something that he was not, something that he wanted to be. And he'll pay for that dearly, because he'll never be able to have those as professions.
Yeah. Well, I have a little different view of that. He made some really bad decisions at a very young age.
Yes.
And I don't think that means that he's a bad guy. But I tell you, the best predictor of outcome for change is insight and ownership. Do you have insight into what's taken place, and do you own your role in that? And I'm really concerned about that, and am shocked that you are not.
Well, you're the professional in that arena, so I'll defer to you.
Yes,
I see someone who's got love in his heart, and he never meant to hurt anyone, made some horrible choices. Again, I'm not defending it, but I see him he's doing well in his sales job now, and shows
love. I'm not
love.
saying he's a bad egg. I'm just saying you got to get real with yourself, or you know, is Matthew a pathological liar? I mean, he's been in these things, or is he just an innocent kid that had such a passion for medicine and police work that he just became overzealous? He just wanted to close the gap and get in there and get his hands dirty. Were both of these crimes just a big mix-up? Or is he an unstoppable grade A con artist? I mean, those are the ends of the continuum. I'm going to tell you what I think when we come back.
Tomorrow on an all-new Dr. Phil. Should he divorce his wife for stalking him?
How am I stalking you, sir?
Looking in the windows qualifies, right?
Did you throw a 10-inch rock at him?
I might have.
That's tomorrow.
Growing up as a kid, I used to play doctor. I would run around the house with scrubs and kind of play the part, so to speak. I can remember watching Grey's Anatomy and feeling like that's something that I really wanted to go into.
Well, Matthew says growing up, he's always wanted to be a doctor or a cop. But will his catch-me-if-you-can stunts prevent him from ever really living out his dream? So I want to kind of tell you some things. First off, grade your own paper. In terms of your exposure to these crimes, these have been adjudicated, you've been sentenced, that's done, so double jeopardy would attach. So nothing he says here could complicate what he's already been sentenced for, right?
That's correct. We waited till everything was resolved before he had this healthy dialogue with you.
Right. Okay. And so now, what I always look for, if I'm talking to somebody that's awaiting sentencing or awaiting trial, which I do a lot, I understand that they have to kind of tiptoe through things and put them in the best possible light. You're not in that situation. You're past this. And what I hear you saying is that this is kind of a lot of just big misunderstanding.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's a misunderstanding. There's a lot of the facts that are there are true. The only thing that I would say that's a misunderstanding is just little fine details, and we'd have to sit here and split hairs to go back and forth, and that's not something I want to do. But it's not a misunderstanding. I know at that time when I was 16, 17 years old and all this stuff was going on, it was...
But you're telling me, you're saying, I never said I was a physician's assistant. I put on the coat, I put on the badge that says I was, I put a stethoscope around my neck, and I walked into the ER wearing all of that stuff and started performing procedures and behaviors. But I never said, hi, I'm a physician's assistant. That's splitting hairs.
Well,
you have to own that. I mean, come on, you got arrested for it, you got tried for it, you got convicted of it.
It's not that I actually went in there and was like, oh, I'm a physician's assistant or even a physician's assistant student. There was people that I was with during the whole course that I was there throughout the month and a half that I was in the hospital. I was with somebody the whole time. And they knew that even though I wasn't a student, I had told them that I was a student, so there wasn't that, misleading factor as far as, because I knew I had the ID. I knew that, by it saying PA, that it says physician's assistant. I made sure that that was cleared up with almost everyone that I came into contact with.
Have you ever heard of what's called the but-for test? It's just a real simple way of talking about proximate cause in the law. And I don't mean to play boy lawyer here, but I worked in the litigation arena legitimately. for a lot of my career, and one of the things I did was have to explain things to juries, and we always look for the but-for test. But for this happening, that wouldn't have happened. And but for that happening, that wouldn't have happened. So unless A happens, then B wouldn't happen. Unless B happens, C wouldn't happen. And so I always look at just a simple but-for test. And but for you going down and lying about being a student, then you wouldn't have been given the wrong badge. And but for failing to hand back the wrong badge and get the correct badge and then walk into the emergency room, you wouldn't have been in a situation that you got arrested for and put in jail. And I don't hear, you don't get
not as much here. No. He has to me. He has to his mother. We've had these dialogues. You know, he has. But again, I can't defend how he's behaving now. I mean, if he's not, then call him out on it.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
I know that I put myself in a bad position. I think about it every single day.
You got your seatbelt on? You're talking to a cop and you're not. No, I wrote a book about this called Life Code, and I don't know if you've ever read it, but I brought you a copy here because I'm going to give it to you. You can read it on the plane on the way home. And in Life Code, I tell you how I wrote this book. I sat down one day and I was kind of thinking through a bunch of stuff, and I got in trouble with Robin for this because I was putting stuff all up on the wall in the house and everything. She said, "What are you doing in here?" But I started looking back at all the people in my life along the way that had jerked me around. In any way, lied to me, exploited me, I've been embezzled from, all of this. And when I was thinking about it, what struck me, and as the reason I wrote the book, I was not intending to write this book, didn't plan to write the book, didn't want to write the book, said I wasn't going to write the book. But I started noticing a pattern that was consistent among all of these people. And I developed a concept called Bader. And Bader is this: backstabbers, abusers, imposters, takers, exploiters, and reckless. And when I look at you and what you've done, you certainly abused the system. You certainly were an imposter not once but twice, although you say that was a big misunderstanding. Taking things in terms of privileges and positions that you shouldn't be, exploiting people's trust, and damn certain being reckless. So I don't think you're a backstabber, frankly, although you did use your friend's father to get the job to begin with to go in, which seemed to be, I don't know, kind of the wrong thing to do. But a lot of these things seem to describe your behavior at the time. Were you an imposter?
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and then it just kind of spun out of control. I hate that when that happens.
And it's you know.
I've wanted to be an airline pilot all my life. In fact, that's what I was going to do if I didn't do this. And I've gotten on airlines so many times, but I always turn right instead of left. I never, you know, I hate it when that happens. I'm just like, oh, I meant to sit in 1A, and damn, here I am. Well, whatever. You know, you don't just get caught up in that. You cause it to happen, right?
Absolutely.
There is something that I call the evil eight. And this, to me, these are the things that baiters use to victimize those people they victimize. They have a sense of arrogant entitlement. And you got your seatbelt on? You're talking to a cop and you're not. I mean, that just seems, you just really don't seem to get it. I think you say remorse and guilt. I don't know. It was certainly irresponsible and self-destructive. There was certainly a lot of drama. You certainly outsmarted people. And, man, talk about fantasy world and delusional. I mean, again, you're hitting 7 out of 8 of these things seem to apply. And I get that. But you don't think about the people that have jerked you around in your lives. And then look at this list. Doesn't it turn out pretty common? They have this sense of entitlement. They don't care if they've taken your time, your money, your daughter, your whatever. They tend to be irresponsible and self-destructive. They're just reckless. I mean, like we talked about before. You had dreams for 2 areas.
Yes, sir.
And you are foreclosed from both of them at this point, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Because you have how many felonies? You have 2 felony convictions now?
9, 10, I believe. 9 or 10.
Different charges?
Throughout both of the cases combined,
Okay.
that would be...
So 2 cases, 2 felony cases, and that many charges under...
Absolutely. A lot of doors are closed to him.
Yeah.
He paid dearly.
Yeah, and that means he's walking on really thin ice.
Oh, sure. And he's on supervision right now. So, you know, he doesn't pay every cent that he owes. He does something that's not right. They're going to strip him of his liberty again.
Yeah, and then it's a pretty fast track back to prison then, right?
Oh, yeah.
You don't have the same due process you do if you weren't on probation.
The prosecutors in the Osceola County case appealed the judges giving him only a year. They wanted more prison time for him.
Right. So they didn't think it was just a misunderstanding.
No.
Yeah. Did you do wrong so far as this impersonating a police officer? Did you make bad decisions, do wrong things there?
Pulling up next to him and even engaging in any conversation, putting myself in the position to drive that type of vehicle, knowing what's going on, bringing that stuff down to Miami, even if I was there to get a security course and get us, you know, going for the security certification. I know that I put myself in a bad position, and I think about it every single day.
All right. Well, next, he's been a doctor and a cop. What could Matthew possibly pretend to be next? We're wondering if he was going to dress up as a pilot and fly the plane here. He didn't do that because he's here. Has he finally learned his lesson, or is he still in denial? I got a few questions that I think are going to answer that. We'll be right back. Ready to get real? Go to drphil.com for advice on relationships, parenting, finances, and more. Plus, weigh in on your favorite episodes, share your stories, and find support in the Dr. Phil community. When you sign up for the community, you will automatically be subscribed to the Dr. Phil Show newsletter. Log on to drphil.com today. Okay, I'm here talking to Matthew, and listen, simple question. Are you the one that got you in this trouble? I'm not saying the police reports were all exactly right or accurate or whatever, that people interpreted things right or wrong. Who put you in this situation?
Me. 16-year-old Matthew Scheid.
Yeah, you did it. And I personally believe that paying a lifelong penalty for things you did when you were 16 that, thank God, did not result in anyone being seriously injured or dead is beyond harsh. I think what you did was wrong. I think it was the stupidity that only a 16-year-old that can't see around corners could reason themselves into. But I think 2 things very strongly about this. One, you got to own this. And if there are little things where, like, I didn't really say this, kind of, sort of, boy, I would drop that from my vocabulary. I would drop that because it sounds like you are still trying to manipulate and kind of equivocate and obfuscate and do all of these things to deflect from your own accountability, and that is highly unbecoming to you. And you shouldn't do it with others, and you shouldn't do it with yourself. Yes, sir. The way we learn about ourselves is we watch what we do, we observe it, and then based on what we see, we make attributions to ourselves about ourselves. Like if you see yourself do something really tough, really hard, and you do it, you go, wow, I did that. I'm a doer of hard things. You attribute that to yourself. That's how we build our self-image and our self-esteem. I don't want you observing yourself still out there trying to kind of spin this and put something on it. You got to own this. You did something really stupid. Now, The other thing I feel very strongly is you were 16, and 16-year-olds do really stupid stuff. And I think to be hammered for the rest of your life when you're 25, 35, 45, 55, 60, and 70 because of some stupid things you did when you were 16 that resulted in no one getting injured or dead is just not right. I don't support that at all. And I'm willing to make that statement and make that clear. You're not helping me because you're saying, well, you know, the police did this. You need to own this. You got big stupid, right? Yeah. And I support your truthful moving forward. Yes, and if you choose otherwise, you choose the behavior, you choose the consequences, and I hope you choose to do the right thing going forward. Now, as all of you know, Robin and I are national spokespersons for CASA, the National Court-Appointed Special Advocate Association. And it is CASA's mission to support and promote court-appointed volunteer advocacy for abused and neglected children. And Robin, you've been extremely active in this involvement.
Yes, I have. And I have to say, CASA volunteers are so important and so needed for these foster children because they truly are the voice for the foster children when they go into the family court system. When
we say a CASA volunteer, you take some training, and maybe you can't take a foster child into your home, and maybe you don't even have a lot of money that you can contribute to support them. But you can take 1 or 2 children a year that you're just there for at critical times. You become an officer of the court. 2013 is the first time in 7 years that the number of kids in foster care has gone up. And funding is going down. It is the perfect storm. And you can help with financial support or you can train as a volunteer. And I want to do something very special to help give back to this amazing organization. You know that I've written the book Life Code. We talked about it today for obvious reasons. And this book cost, oh God, $26. $26 to buy this book. But our bookstore is Book Nook. And I am going to sell this book to anybody that wants it for $10. And not 26 bucks, $10. And I'm going to take half of that and I'm going to give it to CASA. So I'm going to take $5 out of every book that is sold and give it to CASA. My goal is to sell 100,000 of these books and create $500,000 or until they're gone. So buy 10 of them. Give them to your friends, especially the ones that maybe have little baiters in their family. See, because there's a really positive section in this book on how to win in life, they won't know if you're giving it to them because you think they're slime balls or because you want them to succeed, so you can give it to everybody. And by the way, everybody in the audience is going home with a copy today, okay? I'm very proud to say Life Code is published by my son Jay's publishing company, Bird Street Books, and at their bookstore, booknook.com. So you can get it right there. Thanks for being here today. So long. Thanks a lot, man. That's your copy. Seriously, read that. All right? Thanks, man. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks, man. Good to see you. Thanks so much. See you guys. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.